Welcome to the My Vinyasa Practice MVP podcast, where we explore the transformative power of yoga, connection, and self-discovery. I'm your host, Tina Hilbert, a lead trainer with MVP. And in today's episode, we delve into a profound theme: befriending the shadows, the inner child work and rituals. Joining us is an MVP alumnus who has embarked on a remarkable journey of healing and growth through yoga and ritual. Please welcome Matthew Rada.
Hello.
Hello. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
You're so welcome and so glad to have you here. Now, Matthew is a passionate yoga teacher who has personally experienced the amazing benefits of these practices. Through his own dedicated journey, he has created a safe and supportive space for others to heal and grow, embracing all aspects of their experiences. Matthew's commitment to continuous learning and self-improvement led him to achieve his MVP YTT 200-hour certification in 2021, and he is currently enrolled in the 300-hour MVP YTT. Matthew also completed the MVP Ritual Guide certification, deepening his connection to spiritual practices and rituals. Matthew guides students to connect with their inner wisdom and discover inner peace. Once again, everyone, today we have the privilege of delving into the depths of befriending the shadows, exploring the deep inner child healing and transformative power of rituals. Let's welcome Matthew. It's an honor to be with you today, my friend. I am so glad that you're here.
Thank you. So many words for I play yoga. That was what it was. So many words. I've been playing yoga with the MVP community for a good almost 3 years now. So yeah, and a part of that play has been healing through my journey. So I love this. Yeah, thank you.
I love how you summarize that, like just playing yoga, right?
It sounds heavier when you're like, oh, inner work, shadow, or journeys, personal growth, spirituality. For some people that are like, oh, yoga is not just a workout. Yeah, there's some things we start to learn as we dive a little deeper into the practice, for sure.
And that's a great point. So, with that idea of playing yoga, as a student of MVP, how has the practices and the teachings really impacted your personal growth and transformation on this journey of befriending the shadow? Can you tell us and kind of share with us, what does that look like for you, and what has that journey been like for you?
Yeah. The yoga journey started at birth, as we all come to learn. The remembering came in 2020 when I signed up for the My Vinyasa Practice course. As we all know, 2020 had some major hiccups for a lot of people, and life-changing events happened. Mm-hmm. So with that, I was already kind of experiencing my own life-changing events prior to that. So it was interesting that in the year of me deciding what I wanted to do, how I wanted to change my life, how I wanted to fix this juxtaposition of some heavy stuff and kind of lighten the load, I came into 2020 when the outside world was very chaotic and my internal world was finally starting to settle down just a little. And then, like I said, I found MVP. I knew I wanted to do a yoga teacher training course. prior to anything happening, a lockdown, any of that stuff. But how it all came about, or how it all ended up happening, was in the month of June, after 3 months of lockdown, 4 months of lockdown, saw the opportunity, signed up. And then, like I said, 3 years later, I have a 200-hour, currently into 300-hour. Life took over where I wanted to actually embrace the yoga, really embody the practice, because I was going full steam ahead and wanted to really teach. But, some of that teaching has to come from us, from ourselves, some of that learning. So I fully embraced, like I said, living that yoga lifestyle from that 200-hour of what we learned, and then going forward. So changes happened.
Isn't that the truth? Change is inevitable, right? It's going to happen, and embracing the change is really part of the process. And so with that, some of us may not fully understand what befriending the shadow looks like, or what does that even mean. Some of us may understand it as being a transformative process. So I would love to invite you to share some insights on, like, how did you approach and embrace your own shadow, and how did it influence, your self-acceptance and your personal development? What has that journey look like? Really, I'd love for you to educate us on, what does this shadow work look like, and what does befriending it look like?
For sure. I was, again, introduced, I was introduced to shadow work through a friend who actually was on her own spiritual journey. They almost parallel to we had kind of something similar going on. And then we had a year prior to COVID of, like, what are we wanting to do? What are we honing in? So we started getting those little self-help books and started kind of going back with one another saying, oh, have you read about this? Have you heard about this? So within that bond, I formed a little community, and it was beautiful. And we're still on that path together. But she introduced me to an author named Debbie Ford, who is no longer with us. But as we learned through teachings, time is not real. So Debbie Ford is still here with her teachings. And I was gifted a book. It was called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. It was the first book into what a shadow is and what shadow work is as a whole. Michelle makes a really good point of this. Michelle, our leader from my vinyasa practice, the director and owner, she states, it's important to know where our lineage comes from. So that way we're not being informed by others, or maybe misunderstandings, because we all have misunderstandings. So Debbie Ford learned under Carl Jung, who is a psychotherapist. Carl Jung worked under Sigmund Freud, but they have very different approaches to psychotherapy and some of the verbiage that they use. And Carl Jung actually studied a lot of the archetypes with chakra work. So they kind of definitely ventured off in different avenues. But that's where Debbie Ford comes in, because she was more of a spiritual, someone who experienced addiction and hardships on her own, and kind of had to find her own path through this. And one of that, again, was being exposed through her own psychotherapy work and her own learnings through the shadow work. And then thus that book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, Dark Side of Light Chasers was created. And that gives a really good framework of what it is and what it isn't.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm really curious now, what is it and what isn't it?
Yeah, right. I know. That's what I was like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? And
So
what
the
is
shadow can be that Peter Pan, that if you've seen the movie, Peter Pan has that shadow that follows him behind. Sometimes that shadow's getting into some trouble, some ruckus, not following with Peter Pan. It's very much like that, lighthearted. Or some people take it as the archetype of the moon. We see that one side of that bright, shining moon in its many cycles. And then sometimes we never see that other side, that dark side of the moon. That's kind of where that, and she actually makes that reference in the book quite a few times of the moon being that reference. But with that, the shadow is sometimes reflected in our external experience as our activators.
Oh,
So sometimes our shadow isn't, something that we give to ourselves. Sometimes it's being shown right in front of us. I think we often hear that as the mirror. Things are mirroring in front of us, and if we see it, if we get a reaction to it, it's oftentimes within ourselves. Um, the shadow can also be looked at as the unacknowledged self, that self that or aspects of ourself that we're trying to hide or deny, the ones that we're trying to suppress a little bit. Again, some of those things that we learn ourselves trying to adapt in this world of the human experience, some of those were taught generationally. Sometimes we're taught as a culture. Some these shadows are, again, sometimes we create them, sometimes they're created for us. So that's kind of that work that we get to find is, where is our shadow? Where is that shadow? At the end, the shadow takes us out of harmony. So where are we out of harmony? I think that's the best way to view it. Yeah.
that is a very interesting way to look at it, especially if this kind of information is new to you and you're not familiar with what it looks like. I do like that we have so many examples to look at, either from the Peter Pan aspect of it, perhaps it resonates more from the moon aspect for individuals, or I can say in my experience, that idea of discord or disharmony, looking within at the shadow within me, that's very resonant to how I have gone along on my journey of healing. But it's very important that we have different viewpoints, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's on this journey and it looks very different for them. So, taking our minds, now that we have a draft of what the shadow can look like, even what it can feel like, I believe I heard you say. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that? Like
Yeah.
what it like what it looks like.
I think that's the beauty of it. My my struggles before yoga, before coming into the actual practice of yoga, fully practice of yoga, was an appreciation for alcohol. My relationship wasn't defined very well for me. Um, so I think, yes, in I was numbing out some things. So there's times where I didn't feel, and I meant to do that on purpose. I didn't feel. So how other the shadow found a way to come out in other ways. So in that way, yeah, some people can't feel their shadows. Some people can see their shadows. Some people can hear their shadows. Some people. So again, it's that really kind of looking into befriending, as I know was the word that we said.
Mhm.
Befriending is that way to open up your arms without opening the arms with an embrace, and that's it. No intentions, nothing else, just opening the arms for embrace.
So what I think I hear you saying is that in order to befriend the shadow, in order to perhaps, stick your big toe into the pond of this work, right? Test the waters. There really has to be a willingness to look at the shadow.
Yeah, yeah. They're honest at the end of the day. Yeah. There's always those moments that you hear yourself, or you hear those outside influences, or you get those signs, those messengers that tell you that, hey, this is the way. Look over there. But again, yeah, sometimes we just put up those blinders. Yeah, we're not ready to befriend. We're not ready to befriend just yet, and that's fine. That's fine.
It's funny that you use that word, because blinders was coming up for me as well. Like, you just, sometimes we put on those blinders, and sometimes, they serve a purpose. If we're not ready to do that work, we're not ready to look at it. This is something I feel that can't be forced. Would you agree with that? That this is not something that you can just make happen. This is a journey, a process. Transformation takes time. Would you agree with that phrase and that path?
I agree. I also agree that it takes that statement of it takes a village. It takes a lot of people to kind of help you in creating that foundation prior to even experiencing it yourself. I think that was the biggest thing for me. I have had a foundation with my family. I've been fortunate enough, my mother, my father, my siblings, I've had a very good foundation to always kind of come back to. And I think that right there is knowing that inner knowing. And thankfully that's been that foundation to kind of like land on.
I'm glad that you brought that up because this is an MVP podcast, and which means that there's a strong community here of foundation support. We have office hours, we have our peer support, we have people that want to hold space for anyone that is ready or looking at doing this deep, profound work, and knowing that you don't you don't do it alone. You
I
can, you
Yeah.
can, but like you said, it is nice to have the village, the community to hold space.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't know what safety or any of that stuff looks like within your own body to see it outside. And that was, for me, the MVP community, knowing that I could get online in my own home in whatever clothes I wanted to. No one was going to judge me. I could go in with whatever mindset. If I was happy, if I was angry, if no one was going to be upset at their experience within my experience. I was able to have camera on, camera off. Um, yeah, that little thing, because I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what support looked like or how it, again, because I always had it. I've always had family support. So I didn't know what else that looked like outside of my own community. So seeing that within another community and then activating other areas where I'm like, oh, I think I can heal this part. Like, oh, I didn't even know I needed this healing. Like, oh my gosh. I think that that's the true beauty of the community. I think that's the true beauty of my vinyasa practice. I think that's also the true beauty of acknowledging what yoga is, and that yoga is a philosophy. Yoga ends up being a lifestyle for most people, not everyone, because sometimes you can just, again, play the yoga and subsequently you end up getting all these beautiful experiences. It's an 8-limbed path for a reason. The tree of life gives you 22 paths. You get to pick it. It's all fun.
Right, right. I'm really glad that we are talking about this because in order for any of us to heal, we must first feel safe.
And safe is such a good buzzword that we all like to throw out. But
Right.
anytime someone says, I'm safe, I always like to say, why? Why do you feel that you need to tell me you're safe? Can I feel it? Let's see it. Like, what does safety look like within me? What does it look like within others? I think that's, again, that shadow getting to reflect, getting to pop out sometimes. Sometimes that is a direct reflection. If someone is telling you, I'm safe, you feel safe, and it's, I don't feel safe. Why? Like, maybe there's something. Maybe it's this moment. Maybe it's this being. Maybe it's anything. It's just that moment where you get to befriend just a little bit and take a step back. I think that pause is important.
Which is, so nice that we're bringing that up as well, like that befriending the pause, that befriending a moment where the shadow might rise and you have that intuitive feeling that something feels amiss, even though someone might be saying, like you said, I am safe, it's safe with me, but somewhere in you, you're like, yeah, I'm not picking up what you're putting down, friend. I'm not feeling it that same way. I feel like I'm hearing you say that also within this realm of befriending the shadow, we also can start to really rediscover ourself, our values, right? We can start to have that compassionate self-forgiveness. We can start to look at the activating words or moment. It really feels like what you're sharing to me, the way that it's landing is this befriending the shadow work opened up a door for you to acknowledge all the different areas of your life where the shadow could appear, maybe not loud and, you know, hey, I'm here, your shadow, but more like tap, 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 tap. There's a little something here. Would you agree with that? Is that what it felt like for you?
Yeah, yeah, the shadow is oftentimes in the reflection. It was in the after where I was like, huh, where did that decision come from? Or I maybe if I had that moment of pause, I would have chosen a little differently, said words a little nicer, or maybe not have said any words, or maybe would have had established a boundary, or what a boundary looks like within me. Um, Debbie Ford really does a great job in the book of giving that framework of giving personal experiences of what she went through with her struggles, and then how that juxtaposition um, of where she tried to create that harmony within herself and how she had to keep on looking back at those moments, not necessarily reliving them per se, but looking at that and then looking at herself and saying, where have I done that to me? Or where have I done that to others? And I think that is that biggest key in that to turn that lock for me, especially too, because there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I would never do that to someone. I would never do that. And then I get in the car and I immediately cut someone off, or I think I'm entitled to do this. And then in that moment, that's that beautiful, we have a term for that. It's called Pratipakshabhavana, is the practice in yoga where it's comparison of opposites. Oftentimes, the comparison of opposites can be a negative to a positive. I kind of like to take the negative positive out and just look at it as in your body, does it feel heavy? Does it feel light? Does this feel like it's giving you something, or does this feel like it's taking something away from you? I think we all know that feeling of getting offered something that we love and we want, and then someone just coming up behind us and taking something away. So I think we all can kind of feel that, and that's kind of what that shadow is essentially doing. That shadow is taking you away from that experience. That shadow is kind of giving you another place, another framework, where your perspective is now, here's what's happening internally. Now it's also showing externally. So yeah, it's where have I done it to myself? Where have I done it to others? Is a really good place to look at.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, that's beautiful work and reflection questions to jot down or journal with later, because that to me keeps our container clear and judgment free, right? And
That's
so,
important. It's important for us as yoga teachers. We're experiencing these profound moments with either one-on-one experiences or group settings, or we would like to be as clean as we can for everyone,
sure.
ourselves including. So again, that it's for our students, it's for us. A clean container is just healthy. I think someone has said it before, we're just leaky vessels. And I laughed at it because I'm like, what? And they're like, well, think about it. We're crying, snot, this, like we're just constantly leaking. So it's okay.
Yeah,
Let it out. It's fine. But at the end of the day, there's certain avenues. Let's contain ourselves. Let's contain
right,
ourselves.
right, right. And we even, leak through our subtle bodies for those that are familiar with the chakra work, which today's podcast is not about that. But if you're familiar with the chakra system or the energy bodies, we leak through there. So that idea of having this leaky vessel is you can look at is a neat way to look at the same thing differently through different lenses. And reflecting on what you had said earlier, just imagine if we as children, I think of my daughter, of really trying to help relieve them of that idea of judging others so harshly, or being in that place of judgment. Oh, I would never do that. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, this, that, and the other. And I know with a lot of us, we may not have had that kind of insight given to us as children, like how to look at things um, very openly as children. And the shadow work can definitely overshadow, I would say, the child within us. And this leads us into this inner child work, this powerful healing modality of, what does it look like to heal the inner child? And I'm feeling as if through this conversation that we're having, the two of them dovetail together so very nicely to really look through this loving lens of, through the eyes of the child, what does the inner child work look like? Through the eyes of an adult child, what does the inner child look like? Through the eyes of befriending the shadow, does my child come up in this moment? So if you could explain like your personal experiences maybe with inner child work, or what techniques have been really impactful for you, or anything along those lines that help us as listeners get a better grasp on, like, okay, so what's this inner child work about?
Yeah. So, like I said, time isn't real. It's a joke. There's a lot of things that I still remember as a child, like mental rememberings. So that way I could remember as an adult. And I didn't know why I was making these like little mile markers for me. But one of them was always I think it was like first grade to third grade. I was that kid that had the desk next to the teacher because I had behavioral issues. I talked a lot. I didn't sit down all the time. That was the ADD era where they gave everyone like Ritalin and stuff. And they, anyways, neither here nor there. My parents, who like you were saying, Tina, if you don't have that as a child, if you don't have that person to look at to regulate, and that person also doesn't know how to regulate within themselves, who do they look to? Who do they emulate? And unfortunately, they just emulate the dysregulation and not the regulation. So I was fortunate enough. My parents are young, so they knew right off the bat that they were closer in my age than anything else. So they were like, we don't have these tools. So they gave me to beautiful hands of therapists, and I've always had wonderful outlets. And I think that's how I was positioned to that as from my mother was, you get an hour to talk about yourself. Enjoy it. Like, that's fine. You're a disruption in class, like save all that energy because you get an hour to talk all about you. And so I did, and I loved it. And I think within that, having that as a child helped me as an adult get to now play with my inner child and actually get to forgive all these things that all these adults who didn't have resources telling me certain things of how to be, how to live, how to ... inserting their shadow into my shadow. And unfortunately, unfortunately, I had a place to talk about these people that were giving me my shadow. And I was able to have an adult tell me, like, how does that feel? Is that you? It's not you. Good. Let it go. I was taught very early how to release and let go, which, yeah, I think that was imperative to my growth, my foundation, my journey.
Wow, no kidding, right? To learn at a young age how to release and let go.
And it's funny because I didn't know these are all words. These are all tools of, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old. I didn't fully take it, but these are things that now when I'm in Shavasana in corpse pose, I had these, oh my gosh, that's what that therapist was saying. Like, oh, and I've been doing this, but I didn't realize. And then it brings me to the yoga. It brings me to the sutras of Patanjali. There's little things I'm like, wow, I think they were doing this when I was young and I was doing this with them, but I didn't know. And now it's, again, these rememberings and unlearning and remembering and unlearning. That's beautiful. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. That's what this journey is for that work.
And really, don't you think that's what the journey will be?
Yeah. And it's funny too, because the teens have that inner child, the 20s have that inner child. I am now realizing what my 30s has as that inner child. So yes, that inner child grows, that inner child develops. Yeah. And again, like we were talking about, that shadow is, going to be there. It is there. Debbie Ford does that really good framework of letting us know, like, it's not you, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing bad,
Love
it's
that.
us. Yeah, it's us, it's in us. um of course, you could take it further and say generational. You can go in further. There's some healing that I've done generationally from my grandparents that I know, and they've told me, they're like, because of you, I can look at this different. And da, da, da. So sometimes it may start off with, I don't want to be like that person, and then it creates a little shadow in us that now there we go. We didn't know.
Sure, sure. This is also very interesting to look at and to relate to in so many different ways of embracing, right? Instead of looking at the shadow as being bad, which I feel often happens, like we're supposed to get rid of the shadow, or even like with the asmita, the ego, we're supposed to get rid of that. Like the ego is bad. All these things, these stories that we've created around these parts of us that are not bad. They
It's
are
made you you.
there.
It's made you you. It's made you you.
Exactly. It has made you you. It is there for a purpose. It is there for a reason. And if we can look at it and we can embrace it when we're ready, right? Like the remembering happens when the remembering happens, like that aha moment that was 10 years ago or 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I've had things shared with me that at first I was like, I didn't understand it. I walked away from it. I got quiet and I was like, oh, that's what they were saying. That's what that meant. Now I get it. And that's okay. That if you don't get it in this moment, that doesn't mean that you won't in some
There's
way.
an aspect. There's an aspect of you that got it. Yeah, there's an
Right,
aspect.
right. And it will perhaps start to make even more sense somewhere down the line when the timeline catches up, right?
Well, and that's a beautiful thing because you can look at it in a scientific way and just look at how neurons, how they fire their pathways, and how it takes a minute for them, and not literally a minute. Again, a minute could be a minute, or it could be a very long time. Fun measurements of time. But yeah, when they're trying to fire, when they're trying to find it, it doesn't matter how long it takes. They will continue to try to find whatever it needs to connect to, that new neural pathway. And I think that's that beautiful, Western medicine meets these beautiful wisdom of teachings from these Vedic texts. I think, yeah, it's beautiful when you just embrace it and just get to learn.
Right. It get to learn.
Get to learn. Yeah, because you're learning yourself at the end of the day. You're learning your relationship to self in relationship to your surroundings, your experience. And a lot of the time, yeah, it does come down to that. Yeah.
And so if one wanted to jump into this kind of work or look at this work, whether it be the befriending of the shadow or looking at the shadow in relationship to the inner child, what does the inner child look like to me, or what does befriending the shadow look like, or how does it dovetail together? This would lead us to perhaps creating healthy routines or even rituals. And again, rituals can be one of those words like, what does that mean? I do not know. And so part of today's podcast with our friend Matthew is to look at these, whether you say phrases, whether you say words, terms, ideas, concepts that often make us go, what? And step back. This is an invitation to perhaps step forward and say, I'm curious. I'm just curious. It can just start there. Beginner's mind, a childlike mind, a student's mind. I'm curious. How would I incorporate a healthy routine? Or how would I incorporate what would be looked at as a ritual? And are the two really that different? Or is it just different words, or is it really that different? So, Matthew, what would you say as far as like looking at healthy routines, looking at starting rituals, how would you maintain them in your daily life? How would one start?
Yeah, I will say, like you said, ritual is one of those words that you're like, take a step back. I love that. Take a step forward into that word. Because surprise, if you have a bad habit, you have a ritual. Like surprise. Like,
Right? Okay,
yeah,
that's
if you have a vice, you have a ritual. Like surprise. Like that's it is what it is. Like you have it's your pacifier, it's your calming tool, it's your regulation in a deregulated world. That that's just one aspect. Obviously, there's so many others. But that's how I found mine was that acknowledgement of, oh wait, if this is that, then this can also be that. And it shattered everything. So that beginner's mind of learning and that little bit of, I think that healthy level of skepticism also is great too, because when you're a healthy skeptic, you want to try it on, you want to feel it, you want to see it, you want to participate because you want to almost, I don't want to say you want to disprove anything because that's not a healthy mindset. You want to go in with an open mind. But that healthy level of skepticism almost allows you to be able to receive a little bit more because you're kind of willing to see where these moving parts are and then where these moving parts are within yourself. I think that kind of helps take that heavy ritual aspect out. It's not a big scary word. It's yeah, it's a yeah. I think that's just one of those ones that when we don't realize, when we're not mindful of our own living, we get afraid of other things. So yeah, I think I just want to like erase that mysticism away. We're
sure.
all doing a ritual. We're all doing a ritual at some point. Um, but to really, I will say to befriend, to even step into that level, there has to be some level of compassion. There has to be some level of forgiveness for yourself. Because sometimes we do end up looking back on times where it's not the highlight reel that we want to see. Again, the shadow, it's the side that we want to deny. It's the side
There
that we
you go.
want to push down. Myself included, these were moments that as I relived, I wasn't reliving, I was trying to observe. And then I was just looking at, again, from that place of, oh, I didn't know what I know now. So what can I forgive? And that was me in that moment, in that space, in that time. So right off the bat, that is the biggest tool. It's just having that compassion for yourself in those moments, in that time. That's that. Even if you have to figure out what that looks like to you, because again, compassion is such a beautiful word that you can read again and again, but until you experience it for yourself, try it on. Look at other people. Who do you look at who has compassion? Who can you emulate that has compassion? And then once you look at that and you start seeing what they do, how they do it, then you can start doing that for yourself and even feel it for yourself. That's one little ritual you could do. Starting your morning and ending your night. These bookends are very important. Having intention for your day is always great. I don't always wake up in the healthiest mindset. I always laugh. I say, do I choose violence or do I choose love? Sometimes I choose violence, and that's okay. And what does violence look like? Sometimes I go outside and I will start pulling weeds if I'm healthy enough and not full of allergies. Sometimes that looks like getting on the mat and doing a harder vinyasa. Sometimes that looks like doing a meditation where it's a little more calming. And then, we get into these healthy mindsets, or these words that we can use to kind of create that positive mindset. But again, starting that day with that intention, I think is important. And then again, at night, if you're a night person, kind of not reliving your night, but at that end, just thanking yourself for the full day, all the experiences that you had, finding that gratitude in everything that you've learned, because you've learned something. And even if it was, I learned not to do that again, that's still a beautiful learning experience. And you can have knowledge that most likely the next day, tomorrow, or the next day after that, you won't make that again. Or if you do it, it'll be in a different way and you'll feel different about it. Because I've done the same things many times in the same way, but with a different mindset. And I will tell you, the different mindset has helped way better than fixing how I do it or what outfit I'm wearing. The mindset is definitely helped.
this is a very interesting point of view to cover now, because you use the word violence, and it made me think of what would be also called himsa or ahimsa, right? And so when we're looking at that, coming from the yamas of the ahimsa point of view, is that non-violent point of view versus that violent point of view. And that oftentimes there again is one of those words that can be misunderstood, but when looked at, we can be self-harming just through our thoughts, and just through our actions. I've even had someone, you know, say, look at the way that you are preparing your food. Are you gently cutting your vegetables to put them into the pot? Are you lovingly putting the vegetables into the pot of stew or the skillet or whatever you have? Or are you just rah, 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 chopping, 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 chopping very violently, right? So we can bring in ahimsa into, like you were saying, the morning, but in this way, we can also bring the himsa in, like look at that Patibhakshabhavana, like you had spoke of earlier, and really getting real and authentic with, how do I feel when I rise today? And oftentimes that opposite is what helps us. If I'm feeling very, let's say, rajas or pitta or hot, like I just rose hot, maybe I need to discharge that energy before I do anything else,
Yep.
to bring me back more to even, a sattvic calming, or whatever it is that I am looking for in that moment. So on this idea of ritual, it sounds like it could be something that's quite simple.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yep. That how you simplified it right there is the ritual could just be that simple change of thought, that acknowledgement of thought. Sometimes it doesn't have to be the change. You can acknowledge and say, wow, I have a very negative outlook right now. Nothing good or bad. You don't, negative is, you can acknowledge what you can acknowledge.
Right.
You don't have to change it in that moment, but at least it gives you a framework where now you don't have to go any further. You can let that be the stopping point. You
Mhm.
can go, the opposite way now. That's that again, Pratipakshbhavana. What does that look like? What does this opposite look like of this? Now that we've noticed that we have a negative outlook or a thought process that isn't serving us. I think that would be the best phrase. Is this a thought that serves us? Is this, and again with that the yamas, that was the beautiful way of starting out, was ahimsa, nonviolence. How am I nonviolent to not am I violent to myself? How have I been violent to myself? And then vice versa. Where have I shown nonviolence to myself? Where have I shown nonviolence to others? Going back to that, yeah, simple rituals.
Simple rituals. And I feel like with everything that we've discussed today in this podcast, we could really look at it through a simple lens.
Keep it simple.
Keep it
Especially
simple.
as we learn, keep it simple, because we learn on a daily basis. If we're not careful, we're learning the things we shouldn't learn sometimes. We're just
Mhm.
constantly learning. So yes, being mindful.
Yeah. I like that we're coming to kind of the summary of all this, and we are landing in this place of simplicity. We are acknowledging and landing in such a way that befriending the shadow can just be one simple step.
Mhm,
And that may just be acknowledgement. You use that
mhm,
word earlier. Like that could just be acknowledgement of befriending the shadow. We can take that into the inner child work. And perhaps again, that looks like acknowledging the inner child within, or acknowledging that we all were children at one point in time, right? We were all children at one point in time, and we only had the tools that we had at that time. which of course are very limited in childhood for most of us.
Mhm.
Because we're just not adults yet. We haven't had enough life. The brain is still developing. There's a lot going on. But as we grow, one of the things that we can do to simplify this inner child work is to look at the adult that we are now, or I could say that I am now. And I am in a place where I can love that inner child within me. I can love little Tina. I can start just simply there by embracing her and saying, I love you. And I have some tools now, right? Very simple stuff. And then as you also said, which was profound and really great, is that the ritual could start by just acknowledging the thought.
Mhm. Yeah, you're trying to befriend. What's the difference between a friend and a stranger? Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement. At the end of the day, acknowledgement. Just
Acknowledgement.
walking past them saying hello, friend, or hello, shadow. That right there is acknowledgement. You can walk past, but that's what keeps it from being a stranger to you and yourself, you know?
Beautiful. And that really seems to help summarize all of everything that we've talked about, where the takeaway from today could be acknowledgement.
Yeah, there's a beautiful ritual around acknowledgement. And that's
There you
just that, the
go.
power of that thought. Yeah, that right there. Doing it every day, every morning and night. Or, I have a beautiful one where I say my affirmation when I drink water. I have my water affirmation. And that, because I know I can feel it. I sense it. I know where it's going. And then I know where it's going after a while too. It has that full beautiful cycle. Again, being a leaky vessel. So that's how, I get to really pull that in of what serves me, what's releasing, what's letting go, because my body is naturally doing it as well. So just that, drink water, have that affirmation, and remember it's going through.
I love that you brought us back to the leaky vessel. And I love that you brought us back to letting go as well. Like, looking at how we do naturally let go. So,
Yeah,
this idea of acknowledgement and letting go, befriending, embracing, we've got so much to reflect on later, to journal on later. Matthew, I really want to thank you for bringing your authentic self today, for being a guest on this MVP podcast. Do you have anything else you would like to share with us before we start to close this session down for the day?
I have so many thanks for everyone in the MVP community, from the lead trainers to the trainers to just everyone that participates in this. You've made me ultimately. You've given me a lot of permission. And I think that has been real key for me. To be authentically me, no matter what. I think that's the best thing. So love and light for everyone. That's for sure.
What a great phrase, everyone. Be your authentic self, authentically me, right? Authentically me. Thank you again, Matthew. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of the MVP podcast. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Matthew Rada for sharing his wisdom and insight on befriending the shadows and the importance of inner child work and rituals. Whatever that looks like to you, we're going to keep it simple. Remember, the path to self discovery and healing is a lifelong journey. And we hope that today's conversation has inspired you to embark on your own transformative practices. Join us the next time as our MVP podcast continue to explore the vast, beautiful world of yoga, connection, and self-discovery. And lastly, everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, Please be sure to subscribe to the MVP podcast. Leave us a review. Share it with your friends and loved ones. We will put a link to Debbie Ford's book below so that you have that to research if you feel called. Until next time, may you find peace, healing, and a deeper connection to yourself. Matthew, thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening.